There's a lot of ways to join two boards together, but choosing the method to use can be confusing, and the problem is a lot of YouTube videos actually make it worse by trying to prove which joint is the absolute strongest or provides the best bang for your buck. And in my opinion, those are misleading you a little because they're trying to get you to think
there can be only one.
But there are a load of good methods to use once you understand when and where to use them. After all, not every joint's the same, so choosing a method to use doesn't have to be the same either. So let's start with the most basic joint in woodworking, which is just wood and glue.
Oh, you make it sound so easy.
By the way, I tried to order this video by the cheapest joinery that requires the least amount of tools and skills, and then we go up from there. So this joinery method is used all the time for edge banding around cabinets, or probably its most famous use is in cutting boards or tabletops, which is just a big cutting board. The good thing about this method is really the only tools required are going to be some clamps to hold everything together while that glue dries, and some good options for clamps are these three here, starting with the F-style clamp. See, F. And these are really affordable clamps, great for the beginner woodworker. The only downside is that they're going to top out in length around 24 to 30 inches, so the size project that you can use them on is going to be the limiting factor there. Then we have the parallel clamps, and these have really nice wide jaws with good even clamping pressure, going to keep everything nice and square for you. Great for cabinetry projects or furniture projects. And these go up to about 50 inches in size, so you can really increase your range with these. The downside here is those 50-inch clamps are going to run you about $75 a piece. So if the budget is going to be the issue for you, then I would recommend going with some pipe clamps. These are going to be cheaper because all you're doing is buying the two ends and a set together, and then you can apply these to any size iron pipe that you can get your hands on, and you can even have connectors to make those pipes even bigger. So really, sky is the limit in terms of how big a clamp you can make with those. And the good news is this kind of joint can be really super strong. In fact, when done correctly, it can be stronger than the wood itself without the need of any additional fasteners to add strength. The bad news is there's a limiting factor, and it's a big one. This joint only works well when gluing long grain to long grain. If you need to glue your work together like this, you're going to find out pretty quick that this ain't going to work. You're going to need to make that joint stronger. The easiest and most straightforward way to do that is to just use nails or screws and go right into the side of the board. This method works really well for basic construction projects where you're just looking for something that's quick and effective, like building some storage shelves for your garage, or even more complex projects like this chicken coop, which was done with nothing but nails and screws. And for tools, you can start with something as simple as a hammer and nails, but if you want to make things faster and easier on yourself, you can make a little more of an investment and move up to an impact driver and use construction screws, or go all the way for the ultimate in speed and efficiency with a nail gun. And for things like cabinetry, you may also want to countersink and pre-drill those holes, and my favorite way to do that is with this Amana countersink drill bit. That way you can keep that wood from splitting and put it below the surface of the wood nice and tight. But like with everything in this list, there is a downside to using this method in that it's not very presentable. I mean, it's just fine if you're going to do something like garage storage shelves or frame a wall that's going to end up being covered. But luckily for us, someone invented a really cool tool that's going to solve this problem. Do you want to build things with screws, but you don't want people to know that you build things with screws? Then what you need is a pocket hole jig. Perhaps one of the tools most reviled by traditional woodworkers, the pocket hole jig is simple in design and effective at joining two pieces of wood. So why the hatred? It's ugly as sin. Any moron can do that. There's no way that'll hold up. Well, just hold on. I mean, yeah, any moron can do this. That's the whole point. And if you're using them correctly, they're not ugly. You can't even see them. Look at this drawer box. All of the drawers on this miter station were made with pocket screws and glue, and because I placed them in the right locations, you can't see them. And as far as strength goes, there's nothing that a normal human is going to do to a drawer that's going to cause this to fall apart. I could break that. I said normal. In fact, many custom cabinet companies use pocket holes to assemble their kitchen cabinets every day. I mean, pocket holes are really a great solution for cabinets, drawers, vase frames, moldings.
Lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp, pepper shrimp, shrimp soup.
And pocket holes are great for shop projects. I recently built a portable workbench using pocket screws, as well as many of the other things that you see around my shop. These cabinets here holding hundreds and hundreds of pounds of tools and supplies, yep, pocket holes. To make pocket holes, you're going to have to up your investment in tools though, just a little bit, and there are two basic ways to make them. The first is the standard drill pocket jig like this one from Craig, and there are a lot of other companies that make them out of metal as well, but they both work the same way. Essentially, you're using a drill and a drill bit to cut the pockets. And most of them come with the mini jig option, which allows you to take it and cut holes in a larger workpiece. And this one I would call the DIY version because it's relatively inexpensive and accessible to anyone looking to get started working with wood. And besides having to buy the jig, you also will have to supply your own drill. Then there's this machine made by Castle, and it makes pocket holes too, but in a completely different way. It uses a pair of routers to cut shallow angle pockets and a pilot hole at the same time. And because it uses high-speed router bits, those pockets are going to be a lot cleaner and free of debris. And these are going to be a lot less finicky to assemble because you don't get as much of that pocket hole creep that you get when your workpiece walks on you trying to screw it together. This is just a benefit of the shallow angle pocket. Regardless of which jig you use, you're also going to need some pocket screws. And what makes these different from construction screws is they have a flat head that functions like a little miniature clamp rather than a conical head, which is meant to bore into the wood so that the screw sits flush. So no matter how much pocket holes get criticized, there's really no denying that they serve their purpose very well when used in the right applications. Am I going to build a shaker end table with them? No. But will I build cabinets with them? Absolutely. But sometimes you may need a less permanent solution, and you may need to build something that can be really easily assembled and disassembled for transport or for storage. That's where things like threaded inserts come in handy. By placing a threaded insert into your work, you can then use things like a furniture bolt or a threaded knob to fasten one piece to another. I do this with tables because it's much easier to move a table when you can separate it from its base, and I love using this method in shop projects when I want to break something down and put it in my truck or just get it out of my way. The trade-off for that convenience, though, can sometimes be cost. Even though this method requires relatively few tools just to drill an Allen wrench in most cases, the hardware involved, things like star knobs and furniture bolts, can get quite expensive depending on how many of them you need for your project. But when the situation calls for easy disassembly, you're going to be very glad that this method exists. Okay, we've officially left DIY land behind and we are now in woodworking territory. These joinery methods are all going to require a little more investment either in money for specialized tools or time and effort in learning new skills. Earlier, I talked about building your projects using nails and screws, but what if the best way to put two pieces of wood together was with more wood? Here I have three different types of loose or floating tenons, and they all work on the same basic principle, which is to create a hole or slot on both sides of the workpiece, and then this gets glued into both sides. There's a wide range of applications for these, including cabinetry, furniture, and trim carpentry, but there are also some pretty big differences between them. This is a biscuit. It's this little compressed piece of wood in a football shape, and you make these slots using a biscuit joiner. Basically, you point and shoot, so to speak, and a little disc cutter comes out that makes this slot for the biscuit to sit in. So biscuit joints really are easy to make, and they give you a pretty good amount of glue surface to work with, but I think they're limited in their use just due to how thin they are and also how shallow they penetrate the wood. You can't really rely on that for much strength, especially in a furniture or cabinet project, unless you're using it for alignment where you're trying to line up two surfaces flush on one side. I think that's a great use for it. But where these really shine is in smaller projects like picture frames, where you've got a mitered corner that needs to come together and be reinforced, but there's not really going to be any great stress put on that joint. I think a biscuit is a good option for that use. And next we have dowels, and dowels have been used in woodworking literally for thousands of years. They work the same way, but instead of cutting the slot, you're going to drill a hole. And to help you place that hole accurately, you're going to use a jig like this one that clamps onto your workpiece and perfectly centers that hole. But these self-centering jigs don't help at all if your dowel hole needs to be on the flat face of your workpiece. In order to do that, you're going to have to move up to a more expensive jig like this one from Jessam that works on the edge of a board or the flat face of a board. Using dowels is going to take longer than using biscuits because you don't really have that point and shoot option that makes things really easy, and there's also less surface area, so you're going to have to use multiple dowels for each joint. Then there's what many people would call the easy button of woodworking, the Festool Domino, and this is going to give you the perfect combination of the point and shoot action of a biscuit joiner, but with the strength of a more beefy tenon. This is a domino, and it's like an elongated dowel, which means it has more surface area to glue up. This joint might require 4 dowels to give it the strength that it needs, while you could get away with just 2 dominoes, making it much more efficient, especially on larger projects with loads of joints. But as you probably already know, you are going to pay for all of that speed and efficiency because this is one of the most expensive joinery systems on the market. If you're a professional woodworker and time is money, it's hard to justify not getting one of these because of all the time it's going to save you. But think of it as a hobbyist woodworker and you only get this much time in the shop every week and you want to make the most of that time, you could also argue that the efficiency is worth the cost. And last, we have integral joinery. This is going to be all of your old school woodworking joints like dados, grooves, locking joints like dovetails, and of course traditional mortise and tenon. These can all be cut using simple hand tools and assembled using nothing but glue, but they do come at their own cost in the form of time and effort that it's going to take to practice to develop the skills to cut these the right way. These are all beautiful joints and typically reserved for fine furniture and cabinets, where the enjoyment of the process and the craftsmanship are just as important as the final piece itself. It's also worth pointing out that this style of joinery typically provides the most in the strength department because you're essentially fusing 2 pieces of wood together. But you can also argue that in most projects, that joint is not going to need nearly that much strength. I mean, it's one thing to say that a joint can withstand the most force applied to it, when in reality, that joint's never going to see that much abuse. These joints, though, are super fun to make, and it's amazing to think that you could build a cabinet or an entire piece of furniture using nothing but wood and glue, and the whole thing is rock solid. So I hope that this rundown helps cut through some of that confusion for you and that you see the value that each one of these joinery methods has in the right applications and that there doesn't have to be only one.